Welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast
with our mom,
Misty Bailey. Tips and encouragement
for
real-life homeschooling
is headed your way.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 59 of the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast. I am Misty Bailey, blogger at Joy in the Journey and podcaster here at Joyfully Homeschooling. As I mentioned in the last episode and in the last episode of season 4, I'm going to change things up moving forward with the podcast, and we're going to have a kind of a rotation of podcast episodes. So I will do a solo episode followed by 2 interview episodes. And one of those interviews will be the traditional Fess Up Friday that we have done in past seasons. And then the others is going to be more of a topical episode. So I'm going to actually talk to a homeschool blogger, friend, curriculum provider on an actual topic. And the reason I'm doing this is because so many of our Fess Up Friday interviews ended up being super long, and because we got into tangents on certain topics, or because we wanted to also talk about somebody's new book or a specific topic that they wanted to talk about and I wanted to learn more about. So that is kind of why we are doing this, because I'm hoping to keep the episodes right around the 30-minute mark instead of some pushing into 40 or even an hour long. So today's episode is with Cindy Rollins. So Cindy has a blog, cindyrollins.net, but many of you may know of her through her book, Mere Motherhood. I first heard of Cindy actually on Facebook from a post somebody shared, and I mentioned that post in this episode. But Cindy Rollins homeschooled her 9 children for over 30 years. She is the co-host of the popular Literary Life podcast and curates the Over the Back Fence newsletter at cindyrollins.net. She is the author of Mere Motherhood, Morning Time, Nursery Rhymes, and My Journey Towards Sanctification, a handbook for morning time, and Hallelujah, a journey through Advent with Handel's Messiah. Her heart's desire is to encourage moms. She lives in Chattanooga, Tennessee, with her husband Tim, dog Max, and however many children happen to be home at the time. So Cindy and I chat about morning time, education for moms, how we can beat the curriculum trap that many of us fall into this time of year. And I absolutely loved getting to know Cindy more, and I know this episode will encourage each and every one of you guys to have a more joyful homeschool. So without further ado, here is my interview with Cindy Rollins.
Podcast sponsors make the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast possible. So let's take some time to learn more about our current podcast sponsor, Apologia. As you guys all know, we are huge Apologia fans here in the Bailey Homeschool, and I'm so excited to be partnering with them to bring you more information about Apologia. Their mission is to help homeschooling families learn, live, and defend the Christian faith through their print and digital curriculum and online classes. They believe that education should prepare students for life, not just an academic year, which is why each of their courses is designed to encourage independent learning and critical thinking at an early age. As you guys all know, 2020 is an election year, and to help your students learn about the process, you are invited to download a free copy of the We the People activity ebook on the Constitution, Presidents, and election process of the United States, with a free printable mini poster of the 3 branches of government. Go to homeschool-101.com/we-the-people. That's www.homeschool-101.com/we-the-people. Now, on to the podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast. I am excited to have on the podcast today my guest, Cindy Rollins. Did I say that right?
You did. Yes, it is. Yes.
Yeah. How are you today, Cindy?
I'm doing very well. I'm enjoying the beginning of summer.
Yes, it is starting to get hot here. We actually put our pool up this past weekend, and I think if anybody ever wants to test their marriage, install a swimming pool.
No.
It was fun. But Cindy, I'm excited to chat with you, and I wanted to give you a chance real quick before we hop into some questions to introduce yourself and your homeschool to anybody who maybe has not heard of you.
Okay, well, my name is Cindy, obviously, and I homeschooled for about 30 something years. My oldest son is 35 this year, and we homeschooled all of our children all the way through, except my last son, who 4 years ago, he finished out his schooling in public school, long story. But the Lord was in that decision, and we ended up having a great experience with him, totally based individually on his personality. But after that, when I thought my homeschooling career was over, God opened the door for me to homeschool another family. And so right at the time when I was sad because my son was going to school, I got to keep homeschooling, and that was a lot of fun. So I basically am retiring this year from homeschooling, but I am moving myself more into a mentoring role with moms.
Yeah, and I think that mentoring relationship is really important. I know I would have never continued homeschooling had I not had a mentor. So that's an important role to play.
Yeah, I think as we get along in history here, and as we as moms, so many moms are trying to homeschool at the same time as they feel dreadfully inadequate, and that comes up so much. The good news is that's what homeschooling is for. Not only do we get to homeschool our children and learn, they learn, but we learn along with them. And I'm telling you, the older homeschooling moms I know are some of the most intelligent and well-rounded and well-educated women that I know.
Yeah. And oh yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's such an important role. And I think that's something that's definitely needed in the homeschool community. So Cindy, I contacted you. I had not heard of you before. I know that sounds awful. And when I mentioned it to some of my homeschool friends, they're like, what? I was like, no, I haven't. But I was so excited because I contacted you after reading a post that I saw in another Facebook group that someone had shared from you on Facebook. And I loved it so much and felt you had wisdom that my audience would love to hear from. So I want to read that real quick before we get more into our chat, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Okay. So it says, many years ago, I blogged through my life as a homeschool mom. During that time, I met many moms and watched many ministries spring up in order to help moms. A good many of those helpers are now defunct, hoisted on their own petards. Once I was hounded by a ministry for over 2 years because I gave a negative review of their overly expensive, even silly phonics program. They even contacted 2 of my pastors to put me through church discipline because I simply told mothers they could teach phonics for less than $200. But what is it about homeschooling moms that bring these marketers parading as ministries out of the woodwork? First, homeschooling moms are a force, a market force. I scrolled down too far. A market force of ever-growing proportions. You little old mom at home are powerful in the marketplace, far more powerful than you realize. Second, homeschooling moms are often insecure. It is very easy to appeal to their fears. They live and breathe on their fears of ruining their children. All a company has to do is tell you that they have the only way to do something, and insecure moms will flock to buy their products. And so we have wars. These wars are market wars. Everyone wants a piece of the homeschool mom. My advice is that the minute someone makes you feel that you cannot homeschool without their help, run for your life. It really is quite possible to homeschool with a book and a couch and a mom and a child. Classical educator David Hicks says, not until we once again recognize and articulate the transcendent value of sound thinking, wide reading, and lucid writing will our students respond to their lessons enthusiastically. These are all found in a Charlotte Mason education, which you can obtain without spending a penny, unless, of course, you find yourself in a used bookstore. And I absolutely loved that because as we are in the midst of homeschool curriculum shopping season, this spoke volumes to me. And I would have loved to have seen this in my early years of homeschooling. So where did this post come from, and what did you want homeschool moms to walk away realizing?
Well, I'll tell you what, when I used to blog, and I don't blog anymore, I was kind of famous for putting out what I call my annual catalog posts. And really it ended up being like 2 posts, but they were the most popular posts that I ever posted. One was about Alice in Wonderland losing her head, the homeschool mom losing her head at the curriculum fair. And the other was just me talking about my feelings towards all the pressure. The catalogs were coming in and I was feeling all this pressure, and we didn't have that much money, and what was I going to do? And some of it was in one catalog, I remember seeing how the mom was saying, oh, I almost lost my sanity, but until this curriculum came along. And then I thought to myself, well, I don't have the money for this curriculum. So apparently God doesn't care about my sanity, because I'm losing my sanity also, but I can't afford this. And it wasn't that I doubted that those things were helpful for moms, but I realized how easy it was to forget what we were doing and to put our reliance and our trust in a box or in a curriculum, and forget how simple education really is. Education seems difficult to us because we feel like we're coming to it from a place of ignorance, and we feel cheated out of an education. And so when we get a catalog and someone confidently tells us, yes, this is what you need, we don't know that it isn't what we need. And as an older mom, I just like to be the person out there reminding people, you know what, you can use these tools if you want to use them, or if you have the money to use them. But if you don't have the money and you don't want to use the tools, don't let anyone talk you into it or make you feel inadequate, because you definitely do not have to have the things that people want to market to you. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with marketing. There's not. But we have to be confident in who we are.
Yeah, I love that, because I know when I first started homeschooling, I feel like there is the first time you place your online order, which we've been homeschooling for 9 years. And I remember our very first year, we ordered the same big boxed curriculum that the only other homeschool mom in the world I knew used. And my daughter was in kindergarten, and we got this big box, and I was all excited because this mom had used it and it was wonderful. And I didn't know anybody else that could give me recommendations, but we got it, and it didn't work for us, but we trudged through that first year. But as soon as I put that online order in, we immediately started getting inundated with catalogs. And that's the thing, like, you feel like there's all these happy pictures and happy families in these catalogs. And I'm a blogger and a podcaster. And so I know that in a sense, we all kind of feed into that a little bit. But I think it's important too to have voices out there that say, just because I use this doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Or just because I use this doesn't mean it's what you have to use to have a happy homeschool. There's so many other products out there, or even like you said, the library. We have used the library more with my youngest for his homeschool than I ever did with my girls, because it's what fits him best.
And that is true. We have the individual aspect of homeschooling where, as Charlotte Mason says, children are born persons. Mm-hmm. So there's no possible way there's going to be a box that fits every child, because children are different. Now, there are a few things that are very helpful. We want our life to be language based when our children are little, so they hear all these rich stories and these rich words. But it's very easy to get that rich language oriented life without a whole lot of extra material.
Oh yeah. Like I said, I think too, as the longer you homeschool, the more you learn what works for your kids, the more you learn what works for your family. And I think that's something, if I could say to a new homeschool mom, don't rush into the hype. Don't follow what other people are doing. Give yourself time to learn your children, to become a student of your children. Learn what works for them. And it gets easier the longer you're on this road. At least I feel it has.
Oh yeah, I definitely believe that it does get easier in some ways. There's always going to be the child himself, who may or may not be an easy or a hard child. There's that, but also the confidence that we gain as we go along, that, oh, I made this decision for myself and it worked because I knew my child. And when moms begin to see that they're the ones who do know their own children best, then that makes a huge difference in the lives of their homeschool. They can take everything else with a grain of salt. They don't have to be, I know I used to laugh. One of the things I did in an area where I was weak, like grammar, I threw tons of money at that. And in the long haul, looking back, I can say, well, I learned a lot about grammar curriculum to buy, and I bought a lot of it. And even now, if someone says a diagramming program, I'm liable to go off and buy it just for myself, because I feel this kind of weakness in myself. So, but at the same time, for all the money we throw at our hopes, often that is not really what ends up rescuing us or filling the gap as we try to do that.
So if you could go back and change one thing from your early homeschool years, what would it be?
Boy, I had an article years ago. I wrote an article called 10 Mistakes that I made in my homeschooling years. And after I wrote that, I got really depressed. I was like, oh my goodness, look at these terrible mistakes. But I think one of the things that I wish that I had done, and I'm trying to sort through a couple of them here to see which one would be the most pertinent. And I think the one thing I wish that I had not thought it was all up to me. I wish I had realized that my children were born persons and that I was providing them with the best education that I humanly knew how to give them, but that they were individuals, and what became of that, the outcome, was not in my hands. That was in God's hands, if you will. And the fact that children are born persons, that means we are not molding them and shaping them into like something that we think we're making. We are not making our children. Our children are not our product. Our job as moms is to be faithful and to do the best we can, and then to let God create out of their lives what He is going to create. I had a very sharp learning curve when my first son grew up. Now he's a dad, he's 35, he has 5 kids now. So it's easy to look back and say, oh, wow. But, you get that first 17-year-old, 18-year-old, and you're like, oh, I've arrived, I've graduated someone. And what's my child going to do? And for me, my child just seemed like the genius of the world. And he was a very intelligent boy who knew how to play the piano beautifully. And he decided after a year at home, because we had moved right in the middle of his going to college, and we were just learning all about that. Now, of course, this is 18 years ago. He ended up joining the Navy, which had never once entered my mind when I was raising him. So I was devastated. I just felt like, well, this isn't right. I've been shaping and molding him, and now he's something different. And it's easy to look back now and see what a glorious, wonderful plan God had. But for me at that moment, it was devastating because I thought I was the potter, and it turns out I wasn't. There was a potter, praise God, but it wasn't me.
Oh, I love that. There was a potter, because I think sometimes we forget that. We feel like, I feel that sometimes we put homeschooling up on this pedestal, and we want our children to be these perfect models and these perfect examples of what a good job we do. But
Right.
we forget, like you said, that they are, well, like Charlotte Mason said, that they are persons. They are individuals, and God has a plan for each and every one of them. And it is not our job, like you said, to mold them and make them what we want them to be, but to let them become the person that God has designed them to be. And I think that's hard. That is very, very hard for us to get through our heads, particularly as our kids become teenagers, and I don't want to say they finally develop a thought of their own, but they maybe start following paths that we would have maybe not chose for them. But
Right.
you can see God's plan working out for them.
Yeah, it's really fun from this point of view to look and see there's some hard moments as children launch out of a family into the world. And that's just how it is for all of us. It's a big change, and we have to find our place, and it can be daunting. But if we are, and your podcast is Joyfully Homeschooling, if we are going to find any semblance of joy in the homeschooling life, it has to be because we are under the authority of God, and we're not in complete control of our family. We're not Dr. Frankenstein, and our children are not Frankenstein's monster. We have to let go of that. And I think we do find a lot of joy. I found a lot more joy after with my youngest child, even, and I had 9. So it's kind of took me a while. I feel ashamed of myself. So that's one reason I like to redeem the time by telling other parents. I was able to back off a lot more with my youngest child and trust God more with him. I did a lot more praying. But to see the fruit of that, to see that when I backed off, he took control of his own life. um, and it was just a really wonderful lesson for me to learn that this child is in God's hands, and my job, I have an important role, but it's not quite as important as I wanted to make myself out to be.
Yeah. So as a homeschool mom, as you went through those 9 children of homeschooling, then I'm assuming through each child you learn something new. You grow. I know each year. I always say that when I first started homeschooling, I wanted my kids to be these pedestals. I wanted them to be this example of this wonderful job I was doing as homeschooling, because I had no support at all other than for my family. I had no support at all for my family. And so I
Absolutely.
just knew like a handful of homeschool moms. And then I always looking back, I remember looking at some of these kids, like, I could not homeschool a child like that. Oh, those parents, they need to do something with that kid. And then God had a sense of humor and gave me my son, who broke all of the homeschool molds, all of the ideas that I had for homeschooling. And I had to relearn everything. Everything I thought I knew was wrong with this child. So looking back through your years, how can we as homeschool moms continue to grow and learn ourselves when sometimes we feel like we maybe know everything, then realize we don't, or when you're new and you truly know that you know nothing at all? How do you grow and learn through your years of homeschooling?
Yeah, well, one of the things I think I learned a lot, and one of the things that helped me most was that I'm a reader, and I would say the vast majority of homeschooling moms are readers, although we have a lot of auditory learners, I think, now amongst the homeschooling moms, which is why podcasts are so popular. But I think just continuing to learn and grow as a person, separate from your children, like, I want to learn this for me. Okay, my one friend, she tried to teach her children Latin and they weren't interested, and she just kept putting it before them, and they were all boys. She had 3 boys, and they've all now, in hindsight, they've all turned out wonderfully. But she never really successfully taught them Latin because they were resistant. But she said, finally, she said, you know what? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But if the horse won't drink, you can drink yourself. And so she taught herself Latin, and she became an actual Latin scholar. And then she put out her own Latin curriculum, which was excellent and very intuitive. And all of that without being able to actually teach her children the Latin that she wanted to teach them. So, but what she modeled for her children, and what the lesson they learned, was that she was motivated to teach herself, and she was always a curious learner on her own. And she was not letting them stop her. And eventually that lesson trumped everything, because those boys all became extremely curious, motivated adults. And I've seen that with my own kids. All of them, not all of them would turn to me and say, oh, you did a great job homeschooling me. But I can look at them and say, I may not have done a great job homeschooling them across the board, but they're intelligent, curious people who are succeeding in life. And I can be happy about that.
I love that. And I think that it is important for our kids to see us learn and to see us make mistakes even.
Yes.
I know that's something I've always tried to point out to my kids is that I'm not perfect. I make mistakes and I'm constantly learning. And I think my girls saw that a lot with my son who has special needs because I was constantly devouring books as we were going through his diagnosis, listening to podcasts, doing everything I can to best learn how to teach my son as an individual with his needs. And we never gave up. It was sometimes really hard. I wanted sometimes to put him in school because I felt I wasn't doing the best that I could be. But, we continue to persevere. And I think that's very, very important to model to our kids. And because they're going to one day be parents, they're going to one day maybe homeschool their kids or have jobs, have careers. And they're going to need to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And it is very, very important to model those lessons of self-education to our kids. So.
Yeah, and Charlotte Mason talks about setting a feast for our children and giving them a wide and generous curriculum. And mom can very much, that is one reason why homeschooling with a wide and generous curriculum, using lots of real books can be very satisfying to mom. Even in the years when you can't read and you can't educate yourself, you're still reading aloud to your children. Many moms do. And that reading aloud is feeding your mind all along. And it's kind of getting you through those hard years with babies, toddlers, not mom's brain is on sleep deprivation, but reading aloud kind of saves the day for mom also during those years. So I think one of the key themes that I see out there among young homeschooling moms is this idea that we're trying to repair the ruins of our societal education model, but moms individually are trying to repair the ruins of their own education. And that is really where God has me now, with this idea of standing beside moms as they repair the ruins. One way I'm doing that now, which is completely free, is that my friend Angelina Stanford and I have a podcast called The Literary Life Podcast. And with that, we are just, it's just a way for moms to read books and talk about them. And that's been one way that we've approached that idea of repairing the ruins.
Yeah. And then, so when you talk about repairing the ruins, so are you saying that, for me, for example, I am trying to repair by homeschooling my kids, I'm trying to repair the damage that I maybe experienced in public school? Or what exactly do you mean by that? That's interesting. I've not heard that phrase before.
Absolutely. I came out of the Florida public school system, but I read a lot as a child. So I started to be aware that from my reading, just say reading a book like Little Women, and you're reading that as a 17-year-old or a 15-year-old or a 12-year-old, whatever age, and you start to see that these girls in this book, they know a lot of things that you've never heard of before. And so you start to say, well, I've never read Pilgrim's Progress, or I've never read Shakespeare. And you start to get a sense that something is not right with your education. That's what happened to me. So when I heard Raymond Moore on Focus on the Family in 1983 or 84, I'm not sure when, and it was 82 or 83 because I didn't have children, and he said homeschooling, I immediately grabbed onto that because I knew that my education was left wanting. I knew that I didn't want that same thing to happen to my children that had happened to me. And then as I started educating them and I started reading just simple little stories about George Washington or Daniel Boone, I would be thinking, I never learned this before. I never learned this before. And I'm grabbing onto this just basic children's literature, and I'm seeing that it can repair the ruins. Now, my education was in the 1960s and 1970s. And then when I was raising my children, we were looking at what was going on in the public schools, and we were like, oh no, this is bad. So a lot of young moms are coming out of even worse situations than I came out of, because I was still in a very, very much of a reading culture. that we kind of lost in the meantime. But, and this is not to make people feel badly. This is the thing that I want to tell people. You don't have to feel badly about the past. All you have to do is get up today and start where you are and start learning. And most homeschooling moms are actually doing that. So it's a place of joy, not a place of regret.
Well, and I think I look at what I remember my very first year homeschooling. What was my first year? But it was definitely, my kids right now are 14, 12, and 7. So they're going into 9th, 7th, and 2nd grade. But when my girls were young, I learned so much. And I would call my mom and I would be like, Mom, did you know this? And XYZ. And, my mom, she was in the school. She's probably around your age because I was born in the 80s. And so she's like, well, yeah, I learned that. I'm like, I never learned that. And there was so many things that I loved learning with my kids. And I did not start homeschooling, based on the reasons that, you were talking about. But I think it's something that the longer I homeschool, the more I realize how much more I want my kids to love learning. I want to cultivate that love for learning. And I want to really introduce them to all of those things that I never learned as a kid. And in today's society, our kids are learning even less. I remember I ran in-home daycare for years, and I took some of my daycare kids that were out of school to a local museum. And there was a one-room schoolhouse set up in this museum. And some of these kids had no idea what a one-room schoolhouse was. They hadn't learned about the pioneers. And my kids were just in awe because we'd read Little House on the Prairie since they were young. But they're not learning. They're not learning those things that, I don't know, just schools today in general. That would be a whole other tangent, but
yes, it would.
Yeah, but it surprises me. And, I know there probably are a lot of moms out there who are homeschooling because of the ruins of their education. So what would you say to those moms? I know that you have a course, I believe, launching soon on this topic, or it might be launching right about the time as this podcast airs. So how would you talk to those moms and encourage those moms who are homeschooling for those reasons?
Well, I know you had mentioned morning time, and I've been on Pam Barnhill, and you had heard me talking about morning time there.
Yeah.
So I had come up with the concept of morning time when I had my young children and at home and with my oldest. But what it turned out to be was, as my kids grew up, I just kept having morning time. I just kept spending each day in a wide variety of subjects, but only a little bit in each one, because as moms, we know we do not have large chunks of time.
Mm-hmm.
But what the difference between an educated mom and an uneducated mom is very often how they use those small chunks of time. And so as I got to the end of my homeschooling career, and I was thinking, well, how can I share this with other people? I thought, what if I had a summer course where we just kind of had a little morning time boot camp where moms learned how to take the little bits of time that they have and put them together one little minute at a time, and how that actually adds up over a long period of time. And so for 6 weeks this summer, I'm going to have the moms summer discipleship course, because I'm looking at it as not only education, but also discipleship in Christian living. How do we develop the habits? And when I say habits, I don't like people to be daunted, because we're talking about small moments of time, not large moments, because moms just don't have large moments of time. But how can we be discipled? How can I disciple moms? And so I came up with this course, and it's going to be 6 weeks this summer. And if you're interested, you can go to my website, cindyrollins.net, and there's a tab there. You can hit that and look over what we're going to do. But we're going to be reading the Bible. We're going to be memorizing some poetry. I'm going to be lecturing. I'm going to have 6 weeks of lectures, one a week, on just topics like having morning time across the spectrum, how to have fortitude in your daily life, how the long haul of doing little bits at a time adds up to a life, and how you have to be, if you believe that, then you're going to be much more likely to use these little minutes. And so this is just my way of discipling moms. And I mean, it does cost money. I am selling it to this market that I am so critical of. But at the same time, I really hope it's empowering to women and young moms. And it's a way for me to spread myself around, because I found that I've reached my capacity.
Yeah, well, and I feel too that there is a stigma sometimes whenever we do promote things like this, but I also feel that you as a mom, as a homeschool mentor, also give back to the community so much free that you should never feel guilty for trying to recoup some of your cost and some of your time. And I know that there are many moms out there who truly appreciate all that you've done for the homeschool community. So I want to thank you so much for that.
I really appreciate that, because I have always looked at it as over the back fence. We're just moms. I'm an older mom. I'm talking to the young mom over the back fence. And that is where my heart is first. But then also my husband would like to retire someday. So.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I know I had one quick question, and I don't know if this will be addressed in your course or not, but when I first started with Circle Time, when we started homeschooling, we called it Circle Time. And then I've now learned that, so many people call it morning time. And when I heard you on Pam's podcast, she had mentioned that you were the mother of morning time, which I found kind of fun and cute, because I'd never heard of you or the morning time when we first started homeschooling. But do you talk, one question I get a lot from moms is spanning the morning time with those large age ranges. Because my kids are 7, 12, and 14, and we still do morning time. And I've found ways to do it with a wide age range. But is that something you go through with your course too? Because that would have been something really helpful to me when we first had that big wide age gap.
Well, in the very first weeks, I'll be talking about that. And I'm going to be talking about some planning, some planning concepts that we can take to our homeschool for the year, using Charlotte Mason's ideas, and also incorporating morning time into our day, and also nature study, that sort of thing, that some of the things that are harder to fit in. But I started having morning time very organically. Like you said, you were having circle time, and Pam and I have talked about this. In a way, I invented morning time because I started calling it morning time. Really dumb name. I just say to the kids, come on, it's time for morning time. And then when I started blogging, it kind of caught on. And then some people that, as I kind of faded in the background, some people like Pam took over the idea. And suddenly everybody was talking about morning time, and it just cracked me up, because if I'd known it was going to be famous someday, I probably would have come up with a better name for it. But lots of people have come up with that organically, because it is organic. And for me, it grew organically with my children. Mm-hmm. So it's a little bit easier when that happens. When you all of a sudden as mom come in and say, now we're going to have morning time. We've never had it before, and we're all going to sit there. That's going to take a little more discipline, a little longer time for that to feel natural and normal to the kids. So I feel for moms in that position, because you have to be a little more disciplined yourself to not let all the eye rolls and the sighs and do I have to stay for this, that kind of thing. The easiest way to get over a hump like that is to be consistent. If you aren't consistent, then you're always going to be fighting battles with your kids. And so my best advice to moms is, if you want to incorporate something like morning time, it's just non-optional. A lot of what I did with my kids was the same thing every day, as far as what the requirements were. I did not do a lot of this, like on Monday we do this, on Tuesday we do this, because then it was constantly a fight. Like, oh, is today Monday? I thought, well, no, I wanted to do this. And then mom is just embroiled in trying to figure out what's going on all the time. And kids are so good at getting mom off track that she doesn't stand a chance against her kids. So the more things we can just do, this is our routine, this is our routine, this is our routine, the less a stress on mom, I think. So, but some of you are going to have a little bit of an uphill battle. And if you have older kids that are towards high school and you're starting this new, I would either work with the older kids separately at that point, or I would just not push it with them. Let them continue on and start it with the younger kids. because it's very hard for older children. Like say you have a ninth or 10th grader that's never done morning time. Either you can sit down with your older kids and say, read the Iliad out loud or read the Odyssey out loud, something really meaty for those kids. Or you can just say, okay, I'm going to do stuff with them separately, and I'm not going to force them into this time of morning time.
Morning time has become one of our favorite parts of the day, and I absolutely love it. So yeah, if you guys have not done morning time, then Cindy is the mother of morning time.
Yeah.
And definitely check out her course, and she has a couple of books too on morning time. We will leave links to those in the show notes. And Cindy, was there anything else you wanted to share before we hopped off here? Like tell everybody where they can maybe find you?
Okay, so you can find me at cindyrollins.net, and I have a Facebook group called Mere Motherhood, which is also, a fun group for moms. And then you can kind of find me, the rest of my stuff, from those places. Also, I'm on Facebook as Cindy Rollins, writer, speaker, encourager. So that's where I am.
Yeah, well, Cindy, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. It has been an absolute joy.
Well, thank you, Misty. Really fun being here.
All right, you have a wonderful day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
This has been an episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast. I thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please take the time to leave a rating or review on iTunes or whatever platform it is that you use to listen to this podcast. That tells the powers to be I'm not talking to myself. Also, hit subscribe. Then you will catch every episode of the Joyfully Homeschooling Podcast each week right there in your podcast feed. You can find show notes and more at joyfullyhomeschooling.com and clicking on the episode number of the episode you are looking for. Thanks, guys. I hope this podcast encouraged you to head out there and have a more joyful homeschool.